Easy enough. Okay, I'm looking at the attendee list. You can hit participants. We got 7 panelists and a few people have joined. As far as the attendees, can you speak up and let us know you can hear us on the webinar?
You want them to respond in the chat?
Oh, they can't. Yeah. Just chat back and make sure you can hear us.
Just let us know your name and where you're coming in from. Welcome.
We still got a few minutes before we get started.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
Hi, Jim. Good to have you. Hello, Sue. Arjun. Mamdu. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. Well, hello, everyone. Great. So I hope everyone had a healthy breakfast so we can do this this morning.
Protein fueled.
Coffee handy, all good?
Hey, okay, over here.
All right.
Looks like we got a quorum loading in here. We're almost got a good crowd starting up on time. Thank you everybody for showing up on time. There's even less need to show up on time. I feel like people have when they're dialing into a webinar.
Absolutely.
No accountability. no one will notice you coming in the door late.
Should we wait another minute or so or get started?
I'll give it another minute.
Okay. Ashley, every time I look at your background, I just want to go on vacation.
I know, I'm going to put some tropical stuff up here soon just to make it even worse for
Flowers.
everybody. That's right.
You need the
You put a sign up here that says beach this direction.
Exactly.
Maybe a little Jimmy Buffett sign, Margaritaville or something like that.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right. I think just to keep everything on track, we should get started. Yes.
Good.
Good idea.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Yvonne Schwab, ACG Silicon Valley's CEO. As many of you already know, ACGSV is the leading business-to-business networking organization in Silicon Valley, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. ACGSV members are now over 80% C-level executives from startups to Fortune 500 companies. The remaining membership consists of private equity and venture folks, as well as high-level professionals. ACGSV offers an abundance of networking opportunities, And with almost 15,000 members in 59 chapters across the world, ACG provides local connections with global reach. We are offering a variety of virtual events in the coming months. We invite you to visit our website, acgsv.org, to see the full calendar of upcoming events, including discussions on SPACs, AI screening solutions, and cybersecurity, as well as several fun networking events. I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you and discuss your possible involvement with our 36-year-old chapter in detail. I look forward to getting to know you. Just so you know, my door is always open. Now, we are thrilled to offer you today's event, which would not have been possible without our sponsor, Cloudera, and our other event sponsors, Quanta Networks and Smart Connections Consulting. So thank you. To continue today's discussion, you will receive an invitation to join our LinkedIn group, which we created for all participants. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ashley Tarver, Data Evangelist and Global Strategic Client Executive at Cloudera. Ashley?
Hey, everybody, this is Ashley. Thanks for joining. And Yvonne, thank you. It's a pleasure. I've been with ACG for quite a long time, and it's exciting to work with you guys. And it's a little bit challenging these days to put on events, so we really appreciate everybody attending via this webinar. And I've got a great panel set up for you today. We've got Michael Gurr, who's from Cloudera, and he's our Managing Director for Manufacturing and Automotive, and helps direct the company in the area of smart manufacturing across the world. So a lot of experience there. We have Bill Pugh with Smart Connections Consulting. He's a co-founder and managing partner with a great deal of expertise on how to actually deploy these IoT implementations in the industrial space and energy space. Brad Garston is a co-founder, COO of Quanta Networks. As a systems integrator, very similar to Bill, they work in helping to deploy solutions in the field with customers just like you. And last but not least, we have Josh Levine with us, who is our moderator today and author of Great Mondays. And at that, Josh, I'll turn it over to you and let you make a quicker introduction and take the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ashley. Well, I'm really excited to talk with you all about this topic. Ultimately, what I think I find so compelling about this panel in particular is really the intersection or the impact of all of these technologies on the people that are actually doing the work. I feel like too often the conversation and the media and the write-ups are all about the technology themselves, but what we haven't talked enough about, in my opinion, and probably will never talk enough about, are actually the people that are implementing these solutions, are being affected by these solutions, and I think that's really exciting. I think a lot of people probably have already heard this quote, but the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. So this topic was relevant even before all of our remote work, distributed work, and the pandemic. But now even more, we're feeling like, oh my gosh, the future is here, and we need to actually get started. Another data point that I want to point out is in some of McKinsey's research, they've identified that 70% of companies have already started to pilot Industry 4.0 solutions, but the problem is most of them haven't come out of pilots. And one of the top 3 roadblocks has really been actually the expertise, the resources, the knowledge, the people skills. And so that's where I want to start the conversation. And maybe what we can do here, I think, maybe just to level set, I'd love to start by asking our panelists, and Bill, maybe I'll start with you. Can you define, maybe just give us one example of how either, these are 3 topics, right, AI, ML, or IoT has really, has affected, is a case study, has affected our world, or you see starting to affect our world? What's a quick story that you can tell us, something that you've seen or been involved with?
Sure, and thanks. I'm happy to be here to talk about this topic, as I think it's in this day and time, it's absolutely relevant. One of the things that I noticed is at the onset, and we can roll this back a few years, when the concept and the discussion around smart cities was kind of kicking off and around. The notion at that time was, cities have a ton of data that they just either don't know what to do with or don't know how to do anything with it. And you fast forward and we're seeing a huge influx of OEMs actually delivering brand new hardware to an already data rich environment. One of the first things that I noticed, and a number of the cities that I work with are involved with traffic modernization projects. And in this instance, you can look at something such as a traffic management system. These traffic management systems generate tons of data, and there's a number of things that kind of all come together. So what we saw was leveraging that data and driving it into what everyone is kind of coining today as a digital twin, provided the traffic engineers a real-time view, because you are using AI and ML to train the models that then result in a visualization of what's happening up and down any corridor. And it didn't impact negatively the traffic engineer's job. It actually improved their perspective and their ability to make data-informed decisions. So I started talking about that along with a good friend of mine who was actually CIO of Palo Alto at that time, Jonathan Reckentile. We saw this and it was just phenomenal in terms of the information that was actually delivered, and that was all just generated from the traffic management system. So I see that I see that over time it's only going to get better as you start to drive this from traffic calming into, what's happening in and around the city. How do you bring this into the buildings, improving smart buildings? How do you leverage the notion of smart city and smart grid? Because I do actually believe that you can't have a smart city unless you have a smart grid as well.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And so really what I hear you saying is and you actually did say, is it helped those people, those engineers do their jobs better, which actually improves the lives of citizens. So that's an upside. Michael, when you think about the kind of a case study of how this technology might affect the world, and specifically then how the employees who actually, or the folks who are actually working on this stuff, do you have any examples that you can share with us?
Yeah, from the manufacturing side, right? So one of the things I'm saying is, I don't know if many of you have heard of the term Industry 4.0, right? Industry 3.0 was when automation started, right? And in the automation days, you programmed a robot and it did the same thing time and time and time again. Industry 4.0, we kind of see the whole world changing, right? We see sensors have come down 2/3 in price over the last decade, and they're connected over the internet. So now we're flooded with data potentially, right? Manufacturing processes, equipment, it's all sensored up. We can collect that data. Now just think about what that actually provides, right? On the one hand, we're dealing with an age-old problem in terms of how do we improve our product quality and our plant uptime. What's new now is we've got all this data now that is actually at our disposal to be able to really, move the needle in terms of improving manufacturing performance. But to do so, to your guys' point, you have to be able to ingest that data, store it. You have to be able to understand machine learning, and to be able to build out these predictive models that will predict when your equipment's going to go down and predict when you're going to have quality problems. So this is a problem that I'm seeing across manufacturing organizations right now, across different companies. And once again, it shows you that, to really be successful in these areas like digital transformation, it's all about, the people having the skills. It's about the process. You got to move towards digital process, and it's about the technology. And if you don't have all three of those things aligned, and with respect to today's conversation, that people component is extremely important. If you don't have those three components combine, working together, it'll be very challenging to affect meaningful digital transformation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Brad, in your work, do you have any clients or that have really taken this to the next level, actually implemented this people process technologies integration that Michael's talked about, and if so, how did they, what was the effect on the people?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and really happy to be here, and thank you all for joining. I think that, it's a scary time for people, frankly, on a lot of levels, but I think when digital transformation started, we could go back years and people saw this new technology. Technology scares people, or some people. And I think people become fearful. And I think that, even the C-level executives that I speak to, a lot of them, they kind of say, yes, this is something we want to do, but they don't necessarily take the steps. And this type of change is really a holistic change that requires everybody to participate in it. It's not just one group or one silo or a cell within a factory. It requires everybody to have a hand in this. And frankly, senior leadership has to make an edict to decide this is the direction the organization is moving, and people need to be retrained so they can work with the technology instead of fearing it or feeling like they're competing with it. So the key is really to unite and bring everybody together so that everybody can move together in a successful and productive fashion.
Right. So that's a really interesting point, which is not only is there this is a new technology, and so I'm not sure what to do as a worker or how to maximize this, or even as a manager, how do I actually implement this? But there's a real fear, which is going to prevent people from actually embracing this. Because even when you have some sort of business transformation, some sort of culture transformation, and people are on board, it's still really hard. So that's a really good point. I mentioned at the beginning the idea of a pilot, and this is I think a non-scary way to kind of introduce this, right? Where people are just saying, we're just going to test it. No, we're not going to commit to anything. And so I wanted to know, actually, maybe you can pop up for folks. We're going to do a quick Q&A as we move on to the next topic. How many folks are actually, what stage of deployment are you on involving your MLAI? Is it only a pilot, or is it something more? So I'd love to, we'll keep that as a parallel stream to our conversation. That we'll keep that going. So
I'm going to go ahead and launch that question now, or?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I'll put,
we'll
for everybody attending, I'll put a poll up and you can just respond back to it by clicking.
Perfect. Great. Excellent. Thanks. And we'll get some data, actually bring that forward. So Brad, one of the things that we talked about when we started to talk about this conversation was this, the difference between the floor and the carpeted spaces, the OT and the IT. And I think the way that you had framed it was this idea of a clash. Is there really a clash? I mean, what's the difference experience that's happening? And can we, is there a way that we can resolve this? Is it always has to be a clash?
Great question. I don't think it always has to be a clash. I do think that, the carpeted space versus the factory floor, they're supposed to all have the same goals at the end of the day. But I think that what happens is their goals change and alter, and especially at this time. Right now the factory floors are challenged. They need more space, they need more room. But the C-suite and the carpeted space, they want to make sure that productivity remains high. And they're also trying to, this is a challenging time for them to navigate. So I think that more open lines of communication to get these organizations to talk to each other, even within their own company, is critical. And also to say, what technologies can we bring in to help to augment what we're doing? And the human element is a critical part. Technology is unfortunately not quite smart enough to do everything yet. So a robot or a CNC or whatever type of automation is not necessarily going to come in and categorically replace a person. We're still going to need people to monitor this. And to Bill's point, and on Michael's point, having the digital twin and this type of technology will help with greater insights. And I think that's really been a missing element. And I think that will help companies to be a lot more productive. But they have to come together and they have to really find a unity on this topic.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a few questions coming in from the audience, and I'll see if I can integrate a couple of these questions. James was asking, and maybe Bill, I'll throw these to you first just to give you a little heads up. James is asking, can the current internet handle the massive amount of data being collected and anticipated? And Steve was also talking about so much data. How do companies know how aggressively to invest and pursue that information? How do we stay current with the latest and greatest thinking? And is there going to be a problem where it's like we have proprietary information versus open information? So will there be enough to handle? How do we handle it? How do we ingest it?
So there's a lot to unpack there. But I'll start with for any company that is actually looking to solve these problems, you actually have to start with a use case. I mean, that's paramount. I mean, so many companies today go after, we've got a technology, let's go find a problem to solve. And so I advocate heavily, what problem are you trying to solve? And then you can start building around that. The volume of data is actually, one of the biggest problems. Going back to the traffic piece, for 120 intersections, we saw 4 terabytes of data per day. Now, we did not need to bring all of that data back to the cloud. It absolutely makes no sense. So again, we're at the point of talking about now edge. What do you do at the edge? How do you start to be smart about the data that you're actually bringing back? Because you'll start to see that there's a lot of repetitive data. And so really what you're looking for, and to draw the lines of delineation between it, a digital twin, if it's been put together right, is going to say, I'm only going to bring back state change. I don't need to deliver to you a bike that's in a kiosk generating a message saying, I'm in the kiosk, I'm in the kiosk, I'm in the kiosk every 10 seconds. Right. So I think, again, identify your use case, identify the problems that you want to solve, architecture a solution to do that, and be smart about the data that you're leveraging. In line with that, you're going to have policies that you're going to have to, California has the CCPA, GDPR is relevant. So you really have to think holistically about how you're using the data, how you're leveraging the data, and then, what use case you're putting that technology against.
Yeah.
Michael, yeah, go ahead. Great, perfect.
Well, I was just going to agree with Bill 100%. First of all, the use case is super important. The other thing about, what data you push over, right? This is where the edge, as Bill was saying, becomes really important. What we've done is we've got technology capabilities that allow you to set rules at the edge in terms of saying, hey, when do we actually have to forward data? What priority is it, right? So to Bill's point, the vast majority of data, if it's not an anomaly, you may not need to, or a state change, as Bill said, there's no reason to push that data forward for analytics perspective. But those transient types of use cases, it's very important to bring that over. So again, we've got the technology to be able to be much more intelligent about managing that network bandwidth.
Great. I want to bring another interesting question up from the audience. So Cynthia is asking if anybody had an example where the design of an IoT system was changed to accommodate concerns of the workforce, of the humans. So I'll open that up to everyone.
So just one, I'll just jump on this. I think the one thing where when we're talking about automation, I think the one driver has always been, in terms of the low-hanging fruit, would be where the work is overly repetitive or it's risky, right? And those are, or whether the labor, like in a mining situation, mining safety types of things like that, we're having a lot of robotic autonomous vehicles going to mines now, for example. So I think the low-hanging fruit of, you know, of risk to people, cost to people, whether the job is tedious and ultimately drives bad quality outcomes, perhaps, you know, those are kind of the low-hanging fruits that we see our companies moving towards automation types of solutions.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, I think that
Yeah.
this chasm between IT and OT. So, you know, when when IoT came up and as a topic 7 or 8 or 10 years ago, everybody started collecting a lot of data, and they didn't really know why exactly. And I don't think many people really knew why, but they knew they needed to start to do it. Also, the technology and the sensors weren't really in place at that time, but people continued to collect the data. And as Bill indicated earlier, it's not about all the data, and Michael mentioned as well, it's about finding the right data and having the right use case that's contextual. And a lot of times, if you are working with the right technologies, they'll be able to bring the right information forward. But the key also is there's a challenge in terms of carpeted space and factory floor space, but also between IT and OT. So many of these companies have IT organizations, and they're typically keeping your desktops running and your computer systems and your mobile devices going, which is great. Now they've been tasked with helping out with operations within the factory, and the OT guys that are actually running the factory look at them and say, yeah, we know what we need and what we want to do. And to Michael's point, when it's dangerous, that's when these two organizations also need to come together to work more closely together, because you do need to automate that for worker safety. And that's a key. And this weighs a toll on people because they're doing these jobs. I mean, even with COVID stuff, people are being thrust into environments that they might not want to work in, but they have to kind of, sort of have to, it's a challenge. How do we balance it? I mean, food processing is a perfect example. When, management is telling the workers, you have to keep working. And the workers are like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is dangerous. I can't be next to these people aside from the job I'm doing, which is dangerous. So the danger factors go up pretty quickly. So automation, definitely plays a role pretty quickly.
It's interesting to see this as kind of the driver, where and other examples of even Industry 3.0 or 2.0, right, where it was like, hey, this is a robot job. Like, we don't need a person to do this. Hey, this is a dangerous job. So it's actually, this is maybe the opportunity to push that construct forward, where you're like, oh, you guys have to come together. You have a very explicit aligned goal, which is we would like less people to be injured or to get sick, right? So it's, everybody goes, okay, it's very explicit. So maybe that's a decent starting point. And then also the fact that both of you brought this up really speaks to kind of how nascent this integration is into the work that they're doing. Ashley, did we get any responses to your Q&A? I didn't see it in the Q&A
on the
chat
last poll
box. Yeah.
Yeah, let me finish the poll here. This is the first questionnaire.
I think
it share the results.
Disappeared for me, so I don't. Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
So, all right. So interesting. So I don't know if, I think all panelists can see this. What stage? So deployed with success. Actually, we have a good number of folks. We have probably not started, or a little bit of people not started. Thinking about it is the second most started, and then deployed with success. Excellent, fantastic. I would love to see in the chat window if you have a quick sentence about what you did to deploy with success. We could definitely surface those. So
I was amazed that there was.
Really
I was amazed that nobody selected number 4 or number 5. Tried but frustrated.
Well, I have to say we have a self-selecting group, people who are interested in showing up to these webinars.
That's true. That's true.
If they're too tired, they're not showing up. So that was great. So let's do another poll here. How is the collaboration during your digital journey between IT and OT? So Ashley, if you want to launch that one, let's get a feel about what that one is. That would be great.
Yeah, the question I have up is, how is the collaboration during your digital journey between your IT and OT teams? So that's up right now, and we have 19 people who can vote. So I'll keep it open for the next few minutes.
Perfect, great. So I'll throw this one out to the next kind of digging in, pushing a little bit further is what do, like, when we think about not just the workers, right? So let's say the the engineers that Bill mentioned, the folks that are programming, but we also have leadership. We also have managers. And I think that's a big piece because it's almost like they're further abstracted from the use case that Bill mentioned, right? Of what is it, or what are they asking for, and are they asking for the right thing?
Right.
That was a question.
Oh, yeah.
Go, Michael.
No,
Michael, you go.
Okay. Well, I just want to bring that back because I think the management and are they asking for the right thing? You know, I think we've got to also acknowledge that requirements have changed so dramatically of these managers. I'll give you an example. When we talk about OT, operational technology in the manufacturing construct, right? The OT guys were the guys who had set up the plant network to collect data from the machines. And the objective was to keep the equipment operational. That's what was operational technology. So these were very specialized guys who just said, hey, just monitor this equipment to make sure it doesn't fail. Because if we have plant downtime, that's terrible. The IT guys are the guys who are running like your ERP systems, your operational systems, your financial systems. These were completely different worlds. Now, machine learning and this Industry 4.0 requires that those data sources be mixed. And these OT guys have never talked about how do you share that data with your organization. The IT guys have never been asked how do we bring that sensor data from the OT side into IT. So I think the important thing to realize is that digital transformation is driving a redefinition of traditional roles, right? And it involves everything from how do I share between my IT and my OT departments, if you will? How do we share data? And at the end of the day, right, you need an executive level digital transformation edict. You need that to trickle down to your mid-management layers to make sure that these organizations are going to work together. And then you ultimately need to push it down to labor. And by the way, retrain them for these jobs of the future. So at the end of the day, it's got to be holistic. But the goalposts have changed in so many different ways that these roles have to change dramatically as well.
Yeah, let me jump in on that a little bit. I completely agree. I think I'll just layer on by saying, I think if management goals are changing, business is changing and changing rapidly. But I think that once they have a direction and they decide this is what our current path is, I think it would be beholden on them to go out and talk to their teams before they thrust things on them and to say, our goal is this. What are your thoughts and recommendations and how can we collaborate? Many times my organization, we do workshops, or they were in person, now they're virtual, but the key is to embrace all the people and empower them, because you hired amazing people when you started your organization, and the people that you hire in every level of your company are great and very smart. They also have extraordinary insights. Unfortunately, management many times doesn't listen to them or forgets to listen to them or just thinks, oh, you're just a factory worker. What do you know? Actually, they know a lot. They're smart and they're operating and they know what levels of efficiency and what things could be done better and how can they circumvent process to make things more productive. So I think bringing all that together before they decide here's our path and our plan would make everyone feel more included. I think that's critical.
Yeah,
I'm almost hearing, Bill, go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to say I totally agree, because that conversation that you're talking about, with respect to the IT and the OT side, irrespective, I mean, this goes across markets, right? I mean, you'll see it in the city, you'll see it in the utilities. It's across the board. Having those conversations up front help define the use case, that then helps define the technologies to use to solve those problems that have been identified. So I think it's got to be a cross-departmental conversation, and they kind of have to fix that part of it before you ever get to the technology.
Exactly, Bill. That's exactly what I was going to say, which is it's almost like it is revealing the fissures that have actually occurred inside of organizations, even like I do a lot of work with knowledge workers, right? Not even the factory floor folks, and there's still huge divides between the departments. They don't know what they're doing, and they sit next to each other. So this is no small task. right? Of being able to bring people together. And I, you know, I don't know if I want to go full like reorg on this, but I do think there needs to be more cross collaboration, discussion, conversations, information flow. And maybe this is the reason, this is the way that we're actually going to get that to happen, which leads me back to that whole point about injuries, right? When you think about, look, we're all on the same page about this, we got to come together so that less people can be injured in our situation, right? That's such an interesting thing to surface here. It's the same problem, just in now we've got a very explicit way that it's manifesting itself. Actually, what do folks say about the ITOT question?
Yeah, let me do the poll. We got a few answers back, and let me share the results. You can see them now, I think. I kind of suspected that we might get more on the front. Can you see it?
Yeah. So this is, I think, a big finding for us in this conversation. Really interesting that it's such an important underlying factor that these people come together. I do want to call out, Steve actually offered that they use AI to, his company uses AI in customer support to help users better find things they might be interested in. So that's I think a pretty interesting example. And I think that then the next level is really about how do you make sure that these physical and digital things are talking to each other. Brad, early on, we started with talking about being in a fearful place, and I want to open this up to you and the rest of the panel, which is, I mean, really, should they? There's a sort of, I'll say it's a narrative, right? I don't know that actually people are. I mean, I don't know that folks in this space are very fearful, or they could be or not. But I feel like there's a narrative in the world that AI is going to come take your job, and people are scared about that. Is that true? And even if it's not true, if it's true or not true, is it something that we should that we need to assuage fears about? I mean, what is it? Are people going to be losing their jobs?
Well, I'll just start out by saying, who's seen Terminator? Anybody? Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just start there. You know, I think there is the fear of the unknown. I think that, you know, the context is important in terms of what, you know, an organizational goal is. I think bringing the IT and OT organizations together is critical. I think that comes from the top. And I think, you know, unity and team building, again, is critically important. And management needs to really think about how do we unify, because these systems of record that they use are siloed, and they need to be brought together, because right now these organizations are really operating in a two-dimensional world. And they really need to start operating in a three-dimensional world where they have context and they have color, and they can really start to see things that is sitting right in front of them, but they can't see it. Data is that insight, not all the data. To Bill and Michael's points, it's the right data. How do you find the right data? Today it's that edge data, but it starts with what are we trying to solve and what's our pain or problem? And then say, let's go and focus on the data that can be applied to those pains and those problems, and begin, and not be paralyzed. A lot of organizations get paralyzed in, it's too much, it's too big, I don't know what I'm doing. And many of the people that are on their factory floors may or may not be trained to interpret the data. So they need to find people that can help to bridge that gap. They may or may not come from IT. They might need somebody like, you know, Bill's organization to come in to help them to bridge that gap and interpret what it means.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental issue, and Cynthia's re-emphasizing it, and she's saying, is a reorg inevitable? You have to be integrated across departments, and they have to be maintained. That's a great question. Is the solution really not, hey, we're going to maybe the false premise is, hey, you worker one, your job is, you know, toast because we have a robot that's going to replace you, right? It's more about what are the ways that people interact, and it's not just a person replaced with a robot, but it's a task that can be supplemented. Michael,
Yes.
looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, for me, in terms of the worker losing their job, to me, it's a good bit. I think there's a good news, bad news dimension to it. I think that the automation, look, we've been talking about, I don't think it's happening as quickly as people think. I think these things take time. But I think the real opportunity, and I think where we've got to be honest, is that, as automation does inevitably increase, the jobs surrounding that are going to change as well, right? So you're going to have people having to install robots and service robots, right? So there is an upskilling that'll be required. And I'm a firm believer that people might have different opinions on. This is something we as a country really need to grapple with in terms of, what are the key technologies that countries have capabilities in and invest in, and then do it at the college level, at the apprenticeship level. Because at the end of the day, I think, while these changes aren't happening immediately, they will happen. And I think upskilling is going to be critical. And I think we got to really be honest in terms of how we get our population, our citizenry, in a good place in terms of being able to adapt to these changes. So that's just my thoughts.
Bill, do you have a thought on the reskilling and building for the future here?
I do. I mean, the world as a whole tends to forget what we've done, and we continually reinvent the wheel as we go after this, right? So, I mean, you can roll this back to 2006 to 2008, somewhere around there, when AMI, smart grid, and if you were reading all of the RFPs and all of the documents associated with that, I mean, it was going to be this huge digital transformation from the utilities perspective. And everything that we've talked about so far was there at that time, meaning the meter reading group didn't talk to the distribution group, didn't talk to the transmission group, didn't talk to sustainability. I mean, all of those things were present. And the problem that they went after first was automated meter reading. And so initially you had the fear of a meter reader losing their job was a real thing. However, that fear was predominantly on the aging workforce that really felt like, you know what, they're trying to replace us. We don't want to learn. We don't want to do these things. So is it a real thing? Sure it is. But there is absolutely an opportunity to learn new skills, to employ those new skills with the new technology. Now, that was 2008, and we're 2020 now, and you still have AMI rollouts being done. And yet those individuals that were worried about their jobs still have their jobs, unless they chose to move on to something else. So I think that, when we're talking about Industry 4.0, when we're talking about industrial IoT, when we're talking about smart cities, when we're talking about all of these things, it's still that same conversation. Vertically integrated organizations talking to each other, recognizing what problems they want to solve and what problems they can solve collectively with technology, and how to employ those technologies to actually solve the problems, and constant communication with your workforce will help quell the concerns.
I think that there's the conversation is making me a quote. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that there's going to be and continues to be a tension between efficiency of like, just get the job done. That's the silo, versus taking some of that time, expanding your point of view and your purview, and saying, we need to stop for a second and talk across and think about how do we do this together. And that is going to be, I think, a fundamental challenge for a lot of traditional leaders in all sorts of businesses, because I think for generations now, for decades now, business schools have trained for efficiency, right? That's what we want. But when we're talking about large-scale digital transformation, efficiency is the end result. It's not the way that we're going to get there. So that's what I'm hearing. And so with that, I want to, we have one final poll. We're kind of almost here at the end of our time, which has actually been fabulous. I didn't even think we were going to get so far. This has been really interesting. what challenges for success? What do people see as their biggest challenge for success involving people in the process? And if your answer is not up here on the Q&A, just pop it into the chat as we kind of roll into the next into the final section, right? So what
it's also multiple choice
challenges?
too.
It's multiple. Yes, no, that's what I mean. It is multiple choice, but if you have a other, pop it in the chat window. This will be interesting. So let's take a few more minutes and you know, explore this one more time. And let's, you know, I'd love to hear from everyone. What is your takeaway? What is it that you feel like? If there was one thing that the busy people on the call, on this call, need to take away from this conversation, what is it? What's the top takeaway? And I'll incentivize by saying you can't copy the person who went before you. So whoever's first gets the obvious answer. Go.
I'll say, you know, start with conversations and level the playing field. Meaning, it can't be top leadership ruling the conversation and then going, you know, top down. It needs to be an organization, everyone as a stakeholder within the organization involved in the conversation that then results in you know, the movement, the baseline, the operational efficiency goals, and all of those.
I would say
Beautiful.
that upskilling is a tremendously valuable asset, and you can look to your employer for some of that, but also take matters into your own hands. Go and learn your own, you know, things and topics that you can do so you can upskill and create more value for your organization. And within your organization, if you do want to make change, you can make it by yourself, as you said, Josh, and that would be a solo path, or go as a group, find other like-minded people within your organization and come up with some thoughts and ideas and make a gentle proposal to your management team so that they can see that you're not the only person who thinks this way, and that there is some, you know, significant intelligence within the organization that can help to, you know, affect change in a positive way. And, you know, your team is thinking about it, because that way, you know, when a reorganization does occur, they'll say, wow, these are some really great thought leaders, and we need to definitely assign them to great new tasks in our future.
Awesome. Michael.
Kind of I think a synergy of the two previous comments, which I agree with. You know, talking about digital transformation, whatever your digital transformation strategy is, you need alignment of people, process, and technology, both top down and bottom up. And I think people will ultimately make the difference.
Yeah,
Great.
Josh.
Yeah.
I two articles, one from McKinsey and one from Bain. They were totally separately done, but one of the biggest things that came out of those two articles was, don't be scared to talk to outside people. You're trying to do a major transformation in your company, and you sometimes have to bring in somebody who can incubate the success of that change. So it's not a bad thing to bring somebody in early to help develop the strategy and direction that your company wants to take. Find that executive sponsor who will lead the charge and then implement it. You don't have to pay a lot of money for that, but to just bring somebody in who can look at the equation from a different angle.
And one last thought,
Awesome.
James, I see in the chat window, brings up a very salient point, and I've seen and heard this many times before. People are just jumping busy. They don't have time for new per se, or have time at all. And then management says, hey, you need to learn or do these new things, and it's hard to carve out the time. So I think management needs to really take that into account to say, how do we do this? How do we affect this change? And talk to people like James to say, what are your recommendations? Again, pulling people together to say, if we do these things, whether it's data or automation, this will help your job. So based on that, how can we get you in to get you trained on these things to help you? And there might be a slight bit of pain, and I apologize for that, James, but you know, it will help you in the long run. The key is participation and getting you to say, here's when I can do it. And hopefully your management can embrace that as well.
All right. Thank you. This is great. So we have some poll results. So in fact, the largest feedback here has been people are nervous about their jobs. So I stand corrected. It's actually a real thing, and that's interesting to learn. Followed by integrating across departments and yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's a really interesting thing. And then finally, we have Suresh saying that his takeaway is our aging infrastructure could be easily boosted by IoT and AI integration. The IT side has little domain expertise in this area, and this wide gap needs to be bridged soon. Our infrastructure is crumbling. So it is a burning platform, which is in fact, which is in fact exactly what's always been the motivator for massive organizational change. All right, it's like it's do or die, and that is unfortunately what large organizations need to be motivated to do those things. So that would be my my observation and takeaway. So thanks everybody. I will hand it back to Ashley to wrap it back up, and I appreciate your engaging with me on this. This has been really fabulous and an interesting conversation. We've got quite a far ways in the conversation, which was in just a few minutes. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Josh, and the panelists for participating. And closing thought, I want to turn it over to Yvonne, but let me just say that if you thought today's conversation was interesting, under the current conditions of the world, we're trying to change. We used to have at ACG a lot of in-person activities and webinar, live participation, and we're trying to change the format. So we'd love your feedback. Please advertise the success of these ideas. Yvonne, I know you have several really compelling topics that are coming up, so let me turn it over to you, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate today.
I would love to thank everyone for on the panel for joining us today. Super interesting conversation. I really love the questions from the audience as well. Very interactive discussion. Job well done. Appreciate it. Yes, and we have a couple of events coming up. One very interesting one on SPACs. If people know what that is about, dial in. It seems to be the future of IPOs, at least currently. One on cybersecurity. We have one coming up on COVID AI screening solutions. And my favorite right now are the networking events that we are hosting in connection with other chapters. We have one with all the California chapters twice monthly, where you can meet people from Orange County, from LA, San Francisco, and then we have a round robin with our San Francisco chapter, and those events are super fun. We are also in the planning phase of having a virtual wine tasting. So gentlemen, if you're interested, ladies out there, this will be with Madrigal in Napa Valley. That should be fun at the end of September. More info to follow. And yeah, that's it from my side. Thanks for joining us today. The recording will be available on our website. We will be sending out a link as well. And I hope you join our LinkedIn group for the event so we can continue the discussion and keep answering your questions.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.